My sister wedding, my parents demanded that I give her my $450,000 house, which I had bought with my own hard work, as a gift. When I firmly refused, my dad exploded with anger. He grabbed a metal cake stand and struck me on the head so hard that I stumbled, hit the table, and was badly injured. But suddenly my sister's fiancé revealed a shocking truth that completely shattered my parents' world. My name is Isabella, and I am 30 years old. Growing up, it didn't take long for me to realize that in my family, love and attention were not given equally. From the moment my younger sister Doris was born, it was like the entire house shifted its orbit around her. She was the golden child. The one with the dazzling smile, the sweet giggle, the perfect little princess everyone adored. Me? I was just there. I remember my 5th birthday vividly. I had asked for a science kit, excited to explore the mysteries of the world. When the day arrived, I unwrapped my gift with trembling hands, only to find a frilly pink dress inside. My mother, Martha, clapped her hands with joy. "Now you can look just as beautiful as Doris," she said, not noticing the way my excitement crumbled into disappointment. Albert, my father, barely glanced at me before turning his full attention to Doris, who twirled in her matching dress like a little ballerina. This pattern became my reality. Whenever Doris achieved something, even something small like reciting a poem or winning a simple art contest, our parents would throw celebrations, buy her gifts, and post pictures all over the house. When I won first place in the state science fair at 12 years old, I got a half-hearted "good job, kiddo" before the conversation quickly shifted back to Doris's upcoming dance recital. At school, I buried myself in books and science projects, craving the validation I could never find at home. Every certificate, every medal, every honor I earned, gathered dust in a forgotten corner of the living room, while Doris's dance trophies gleamed proudly on the main shelf. I learned early on that in my parents' eyes, love was conditional, and I didn't meet the conditions. Doris was the dream daughter they always wanted, charming, bubbly, and easy to parade around in front of neighbors. I was the awkward, bookish shadow in the background, always too quiet, too serious, too invisible. Still, I never gave up. Deep inside, a fire burned, a stubborn, unyielding belief that one day, I would prove my worth. Not for their applause, not for their love, but for myself, and that day would come sooner than anyone expected. The day I left for college was the first real taste of freedom I ever had. I still remember standing in the doorway, my bags packed and my heart pounding as Albert gave me a distracted nod, and Martha told me, "Don't waste too much time on books. You'll need to settle down soon." I ignored them. College was a revelation. In classrooms and laboratories, I was no longer invisible. My passion for biochemistry and environmental sciences wasn't weird, it was respected. For the first time, my dedication opened doors rather than slam them shut. Scholarships, internships, fellowships, I chased every opportunity and grabbed it with both hands. While other students spent weekends partying, I spent mine in research labs and libraries. My hard work paid off when I graduated top of my class, earning a position at a prestigious biotech firm before I even had my diploma in hand. The salary wasn't outrageous, but it was enough. Enough to start building the life I had always dreamed of. A life where I didn't have to shrink myself to fit someone else's expectations. I lived frugally, saving every bonus, every raise, every extra dollar. I didn't splurge on designer clothes, fancy cars, or luxurious vacations. I had one goal in mind: independence, a home of my own. At the age of 29, after years of sacrifices and discipline, I finally achieved it. I bought a beautiful 2-bedroom house for $450,000 in a quiet, charming neighborhood. It wasn't massive, but it was perfect. Modern kitchen, cozy living room, a small garden in the backyard where I imagined reading books on sunny afternoons. Every corner of that house represented a piece of me, my struggles, my achievements, my dreams. When I told my parents about my purchase, I hoped, perhaps foolishly, for a flicker of pride. But, true to form, they brushed it off. Martha barely reacted, more interested in telling me how Doris had just won a local beauty contest. Albert gave me a half smile and muttered, "It's a big house for just one person, don't you think?" Their words stung, but not enough to dim my happiness. For once, I wasn't seeking their approval. I had built this life for myself, and nothing I thought could take it away from me. I was wrong. Doris's wedding had been the talk of the family for months. Martha had gone into full event planning mode, obsessing over every little detail: the flowers, the catering, the dress fittings. Albert stood proudly at her side, ready to present their perfect daughter to the world. I attended, of course. Despite everything, I still believed in showing up for family milestones, even if I often felt like a stranger in my own bloodline. The wedding venue was beautiful, an elegant hall decked out in ivory and gold. Strings of fairy lights glittered overhead, and soft music played from hidden speakers. The guests buzzed with excitement, laughing, mingling, sipping champagne. Everyone seemed wrapped up in the magic of the evening. As I stood near the refreshment table, observing the celebrations, I couldn't help but feel a bittersweet ache. There was no doubt that this day was about Doris, about her fairy tale beginning, about the perfect image Albert and Martha had always envisioned. Peter, Doris's fiancé, seemed kind enough. He had a shy smile and gentle manners, and he treated everyone respectfully. In another life, I might have even liked him as a brother-in-law. I had gifted Doris a thoughtful present, a vintage locket with an inscription about new journeys and love. It wasn't extravagant, but it was personal. A piece of my heart offered quietly. No one made a fuss over it, of course. It was just me, after all. The ceremony hadn't started yet. Guests were still arriving, chatting, enjoying appetizers. Doris flitted around the hall, glowing with happiness, her white satin dress trailing elegantly behind her. I stayed close to the fringes, smiling when required, blending into the background as I always had. But there was an unease under the surface, a tightness in the air, a strange glint in Martha's eyes whenever she glanced my way. I didn't know it yet, but the evening that was meant to be a celebration would soon twist into something else entirely. Something ugly. Something unforgettable. I was sipping a glass of sparkling water near the entrance, when Martha waved me over with an overly sweet smile. Albert stood beside her, his hands clasped behind his back, looking oddly formal. "Isabella dear, we need a quick word," Martha said, her tone laced with that familiar sugary sharpness that always made my stomach knot. I followed them a few steps away from the main crowd, toward a quieter corner of the hall where the music faded into a distant Peter was speaking with his family nearby, unaware of the tension brewing. Martha leaned in first, her voice low but urgent. "This is such a special day for Doris. Everything has been perfect so far, hasn't it?" I nodded slowly, unsure where this was going. Albert cleared his throat, exchanging a glance with Martha before speaking. "There's something your mother and I have been thinking about, something important for the future of this new family." I straightened, the unease growing. "You have that beautiful house now," Martha said, her eyes shining not with affection but calculation. "And you're single. You don't really need all that space." I blinked, the words landing heavily, their meaning slow to take shape. Albert stepped forward, smiling like he was offering me a great opportunity. "We think it would be the perfect wedding gift if you gave your house to Doris and Peter." For a moment, the world went silent around me. The clink of glasses, the soft laughter of guests, it all blurred into white noise. "You're serious?" I finally asked, my voice tight. "Of course," Martha said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "It's your duty as her sister. Family helps family." My hands curled into fists at my sides. I thought of the years of sacrifices, of lonely nights working overtime, of denying myself vacations, luxuries, even simple comforts, all to buy that house. My house. My achievement. I shook my head slowly, feeling the fire rise inside me. "No," I said firmly. "I'm not giving my house to anyone." Martha's smile dropped. Her eyes flashed with something darker, disappointment turning into fury. Albert's jaw clenched. Before I could take a step back, before I could even brace myself for the storm, Albert moved. And everything changed. Albert's hand moved so fast that at first I didn't even realize what he was doing. In one furious motion, he grabbed the heavy metal cake stand from the nearby dessert table, the same elegant stand that had been holding Doris's engagement cake just moments before. Without a word, without a shred of hesitation, he swung it at me. The metal struck the side of my head with a sickening crack. A white-hot flash of pain exploded behind my eyes. I stumbled backward, clutching my head, feeling warm blood seep between my fingers. Gasps rippled through the room. Plates clattered to the floor. Someone screamed. I could barely hear anything over the roaring in my ears, but I could see the horror on people's faces. I could see Martha rushing toward me, not with concern but with a snarl on her lips. "You selfish, ungrateful brat," she spat, her voice sharp enough to cut. "After everything we've done for you, you dare humiliate us today of all days." I staggered, my vision blurring, struggling to stay upright. Around me, guests pulled out their phones. Some recorded. Some just watched in shock. And yet, Doris stood frozen in her white gown, her mouth parted in silent disbelief. Peter, from across the room, was already moving, pushing through the crowd toward me. Before he could reach me, a voice rang out loud, commanding. "I'm calling the police," shouted a man. Eric, I vaguely recognized him from earlier introductions. He was already dialing, speaking quickly into his phone. Martha lunged at me again, her words full of venom, but Peter stepped between us just in time, shielding me with his body. "Stay away from her," he growled, his usual gentle tone replaced with something steely and fierce. Blood dripped down the side of my face onto the pristine white floor. The fairy tale wedding was unraveling into a nightmare. Within minutes, the sound of sirens sliced through the air. Red and blue lights flashed against the glass walls of the venue. Paramedics rushed in first, their hands gentle as they led me away from the chaos, pressing gauze against my head. Behind me, I heard the click of handcuffs. "Albert Reynolds," an officer announced sternly, "you are under arrest for assault and battery." Another officer turned to Martha, who was still yelling profanities. "You too, ma'am," he said coldly, pulling her hands behind her back. The world blurred again as the paramedics guided me toward the ambulance. I wasn't sure if it was the injury or just the heartbreak, but the only thing I knew for certain was this. There was no going back. The scene outside the wedding hall was a blur of flashing lights, murmuring crowds, and hurried footsteps. As the paramedics eased me onto a stretcher, I could hear bits and pieces of conversations swirling around me. "Did you see that?" He hit her with a cake stand. "I recorded the whole thing. It's all on video. Unbelievable." At his own daughter's wedding, the paramedics worked swiftly, wrapping my head, checking my vitals, and ensuring I remained conscious. I could see Eric nearby, still speaking to an officer, showing him the footage he had captured on his phone. Another guest, a woman I barely knew, came forward hesitantly, holding up her phone. "I recorded it too," she said. "You can have my copy." Within minutes, several guests volunteered their videos, their faces tight with anger and disgust. The officers gathered the evidence methodically, taking statements, ensuring that every piece of the story was documented. Meanwhile, Martha and Albert sat on the curb, both in handcuffs, both seething. Martha continued to hurl insults under her breath while Albert stared at the ground, his jaw set in grim silence. Peter hovered nearby, refusing to leave my side. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, the tension radiating off him like heat. "This was supposed to be a wedding," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "How could they turn it into this?" One of the officers approached me gently. "Miss Reynolds, we'll need a full statement once you're feeling better. For now, we're treating this as felony assault, given the severity of the attack and the presence of multiple eyewitnesses." I nodded weakly, the pain in my head throbbing with every beat of my heart. As they loaded me into the ambulance, I caught a glimpse of Doris standing at the entrance of the hall. Her wedding dress was still pristine, but her face was crumpled in despair. Peter's parents stood beside her, arms crossed, their faces dark with fury. I could see it, the cracks forming, the consequences beginning. The moment the ambulance doors closed behind me, sealing me away from the chaos, I realized. This was not just the end of a wedding. It was the beginning of a reckoning. As the ambulance sped away, carrying me toward the hospital, the devastation I left behind at the wedding hall continued to unfold. Inside the venue, the once joyous atmosphere had soured beyond repair. Guests murmured in clusters, some gathering their things quietly, others shaking their heads in disbelief. No one was dancing anymore. No one was celebrating. Peter's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Lawrence, stood before Doris and her remaining family, their faces hard with disappointment and outrage. "This is unforgivable," Mr. Lawrence said, his voice echoing across the silent room. "We will not tie our family to one that tolerates violence and cruelty." Mrs. Lawrence nodded sharply, her lips pressed into a thin, grim line. "We trusted you," she said, her voice trembling with contained anger. "We welcomed this engagement because we believed in Peter's love for you. But after what we witnessed today, there is no marriage. Not now. Not ever." Doris, still in her wedding gown, gasped. Tears welled in her eyes. "Please," she whispered, reaching out, but Mrs. Lawrence stepped back as if burned. "This is not just about today," Mr. Lawrence continued, unwavering. "This is about the kind of people you surround yourself with, the kind of family you come from. We will not expose our son to this poison." With that, Peter's parents turned and walked away, leaving Doris standing there, broken and humiliated. Peter stood off to the side, watching everything unfold. He didn't argue. He didn't defend Doris. His eyes, when they met hers, were filled not with love, but with disappointment and regret. Slowly the guests began to trickle out, murmuring awkward condolences or avoiding Doris altogether. In a matter of minutes, the wedding that had been planned for months dissolved into ashes. Doris sank into a nearby chair, her dress pooling around her like a wilted flower. Albert and Martha, now under police custody, could do nothing to intervene, shackled by their own actions. The wedding was officially, completely, devastatingly called off, and it all traced back to one simple truth. Their cruelty had finally destroyed the perfect image they had so carefully built. The hospital room was small but quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos I had left behind. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead as nurses moved around efficiently, checking my vitals, stitching the wound on my head, and wrapping it carefully. I lay still, my body sore, my heart heavier than ever before. The doctors told me I had a concussion, but no fractures, a small miracle, they said, considering the force of the blow. I was lucky. It didn't feel like luck. As I rested, drifting in and out of shallow sleep, the door creaked open. Peter stepped inside, his face tight with worry. In his hands, he carried a small bouquet of fresh daisies, simple, genuine. "Hey," he said softly, approaching the bed. I managed a small smile. "You didn't have to come." "I wanted to," he replied firmly. "I had to." He pulled up a chair and sat beside me, his hands clasped together tightly. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of everything hung between us. "I'm so sorry for what they did to you," Peter finally said, his voice breaking slightly. "You didn't deserve any of this. None of it." Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them away. I didn't want to cry anymore, not for them. Peter took a deep breath. "I know a good lawyer. His name's Scott. He's a close friend of mine. If you're willing, I think you should file charges. Not just for today, but for everything they put you through your whole life." For a moment, I hesitated. Taking legal action against my own parents? The thought twisted painfully inside me. But then I remembered Martha's furious face, Albert's brutal swing of the cake stand, the years of being treated like I was never enough, and something inside me hardened. "I want to do it," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I have to." Peter smiled faintly, proud. "Good. You deserve justice, Isabella. You deserve better." He squeezed my hand gently, offering silent support. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. By the end of that week, once the doctors cleared me for discharge, Peter stayed by my side as I left the hospital. Together we drove straight to Scott's office, ready to take the first step toward reclaiming my life. Scott's office was warm and welcoming, filled with dark wooden shelves lined with legal books and framed certificates. Yet despite the comforting decor, my hands trembled slightly as I signed the paper. "This won't be easy," Scott warned gently, sliding the documents toward me. "But with the evidence we have, the videos, the witness statements, you have a very strong case." Peter sat beside me, his presence steady and reassuring. I glanced at the thick file on Scott's desk. Inside were sworn affidavits from wedding guests, medical reports detailing the concussion and head injury, and most importantly, multiple clear video recordings of the assault, every brutal moment captured in cold, undeniable reality. "I'm ready," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I want to do this." Scott nodded approvingly. "We're filing charges for assault, emotional abuse, and attempted coercion of property. Their past behavior will strengthen your case. We'll demand both criminal accountability and civil compensation." Hearing it laid out so formally made my stomach twist. But it also fueled something deep inside me, resolve. Within days, the case moved forward. Court dates were set. Subpoenas were issued. Witnesses were prepared. When the trial began, the courtroom was packed. Friends, extended family, even reporters showed up, drawn by the scandal of a daughter pressing charges against her own parents. Albert and Martha sat stiffly at the defendant's table, their faces pale and tight with rage. I took the stand and told my story, the childhood neglect, the favoritism, the years of emotional abuse, and finally, the violent attack during Doris's wedding ceremony. Scott presented the videos to the jury. The footage showed everything. Albert grabbing the metal cake stand, the brutal strike, my stumble and the blood that followed, Martha's screaming insults, guests rushing to call the police. Every second was undeniable. Witnesses confirmed what the video showed. Eric and several others testified without hesitation, describing not only the attack but also the lifelong favoritism and cruelty they had observed over the years. Albert's lawyer tried to argue that it was a momentary lapse in judgment, that tensions had been high, that it was all a misunderstanding. But the evidence was too strong. The truth was too clear. The jury didn't deliberate for long. The courtroom fell silent as the jury returned, their expressions grim and certain. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my heart hammering inside my chest. Peter reached over, his hand lightly squeezing mine, a silent message. Whatever happens, you are not alone. The four persons stood, clearing his throat. We, the jury, find the defendants, Albert Reynolds and Martha Reynolds, guilty on all counts. The words echoed through the courtroom, slicing through the thick tension like a blade. Albert's shoulders sagged. Martha gasped sharply, her hand clutching the edge of the table for support. For once, they couldn't talk their way out of the consequences. They couldn't spin lies, couldn't manipulate sympathy. Justice was happening right here, right now. Judge Hamilton, a stern woman with sharp glasses and an even sharper voice, wasted no time in sentencing. In light of the overwhelming evidence presented, she said, her voice cold and steady, and considering the lasting emotional damage inflicted upon the plaintiff, I hereby sentence Albert Reynolds and Martha Reynolds each to 8 years in state prison, without the possibility of parole before serving at least 6 years. A gasp rippled through the spectators. And further, the judge continued, they are ordered to pay full restitution for the plaintiff's medical expenses, legal fees, and emotional distress damages. It was more than I had ever dared hope for. Albert and Martha were immediately handcuffed by the bailiffs, their expressions a twisted mix of shock and fury. As they were led away, Albert turned briefly, his eyes searching mine for any trace of forgiveness. He found none. I watched them disappear through the side doors of the courtroom, swallowed by the justice system they had so arrogantly believed would never touch them. As the gavel slammed down, signaling the end of the hearing, a huge breath I hadn't realized I was holding escaped my chest. It was over. The years of neglect, the cruelty, the betrayal, they had all led to this moment. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving. I was free. The bright afternoon sun kissed my face as I stepped out of the courthouse, the cool breeze carrying with it a sense of closure I had never known before. In one hand, I clutched the final paperwork, proof that justice had been served. In the other, I felt the warmth of possibility. Peter was waiting for me just outside the heavy wooden doors. He stood tall, dressed neatly in a navy suit, a hopeful smile tugging at his lips. Without a word, he walked up to me and gently brushed a strand of hair away from my face. You did it, he said, pride shining in his eyes. You stood up for yourself. You changed your life. I couldn't have done it alone, I whispered, my throat tightening with emotion. Peter shook his head slowly. You were always strong, Isabella. You just needed someone to believe in you like I do. He took a deep breath, the world seeming to pause around us. Guests and reporters bustled in the background. But in that moment, there was only Peter and me. From his pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. My breath caught. I know this isn't exactly the fairy tale timing, Peter said, his voice thick with sincerity, but life isn't perfect. It's real. And I would rather build something real with you than chase any illusion. He opened the box to reveal a delicate, simple engagement ring, understated, beautiful, exactly the kind of thing I would have chosen myself. He dropped to one knee right there on the courthouse steps. Isabella Reynolds, he said, will you marry me? Tears blurred my vision as 1,000 emotions rushed through me. Joy, relief, hope, love, The pain of the past didn't disappear, but it no longer controlled me. I had survived it. I had risen from it. And now, I was being offered a future I never thought I could have. Yes, I whispered, then louder, yes. The small group around us erupted into cheers and applause. Peter slipped the ring onto my finger, and I pulled him up into a tight embrace, laughing through my tears. A few months later, we held a simple but beautiful wedding surrounded by people who truly cared for us. No grand spectacles, no toxic expectations, just love, honesty, and hope. After the wedding, Peter and I moved into my house, our house, the same $450,000 home I had fought so hard to protect. Every wall, every room, every corner of that house stood as a testament to resilience, courage, and new beginnings. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just living. I was truly, deeply, joyfully alive. Thank you so much for watching the full story. If you enjoyed it, and want to hear more powerful and emotional journeys, please make sure to like the video, leave a comment to share your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories every week. Your support means the world and helps us bring even more inspiring content to you. See you in the next story.
Parents kicked me out at 18 because I couldn't pay the rent. Years later, I secretly bought their house and doubled their rent. Now they are begging me to remember that we're a family. So I told them, you have time until... My name is Riley and I was 7 years old when my brother Tommy was born. He came into this world too early. I remember pressing my nose against the glass, watching him lie there in that clear box with tubes and wires everywhere. That was the beginning of when everything changed. Mom switched to part-time work to spend more time with Tommy. She'd sit for hours in the rocking chair beside his incubator, just watching him breathe. Dad would rush to the hospital straight from work, not even stopping to say hello to me at home. When Tommy finally came home, things didn't get better, they got worse. Mom would jump at his smallest whimper while I learned to take care of myself. I started making my own sandwiches for lunch because Mom was too busy feeding Tommy. I learned to tie my shoes and do my hair because no one had time to help me anymore. The first time I really understood how different things were was during my 8th birthday. Mom and Dad forgot about it completely. I sat at the kitchen table that morning, waiting for someone to say something, to bring out a cake or even just wish me happy birthday. Instead, Mom was busy trying to get Tommy to eat his breakfast and Dad was reading the newspaper. It wasn't until my teacher, Mrs. Roberts, called home that evening to wish me happy birthday that Mom remembered. She quickly threw together a small cake and gave me one of Tommy's old stuffed animals as a present, still with his name written on the tag. I learned to find comfort elsewhere, mainly at my Aunt Sarah's house. She was Dad's younger sister, and unlike my parents, she actually saw me. Her husband, Uncle Mark, and their daughter Emma became my real family in many ways. They lived just across town and I started spending more and more time there. She'd take me shopping with Emma, buying us matching outfits and treating us exactly the same. One time Mom saw me wearing a new dress Aunt Sarah had bought me. Her face twisted into something between anger and shame. "Sarah, you're spoiling her," she complained on the phone that evening. "We can't afford to keep up with your gifts." The truth was they could afford plenty for Tommy. He got new toys almost every week, while I wore the same clothes until they literally fell apart. I remember one particular incident when I was 11 that still makes my blood boil when I think about it. My teacher pulled Mom aside after school one day. "Mrs. Anderson, I'm concerned about Riley," Miss Thompson said quietly. "She's been wearing the same clothes for 2 months now. They're getting quite worn." Mom's face turned red. "Oh, those are just her favorite clothes," she lied smoothly. "She insists on wearing them. You know how children are." But when we got home, Mom's embarrassment turned to rage. She grabbed my arm so hard it left marks. "How dare you shame us like that," she screamed, striking me across the face. "Do you want everyone to think we're bad parents?" I wanted to scream back that they were bad parents, at least to me, but I just stood there, holding my stinging cheek, watching as Tommy played with his brand new remote control car in the next room. By the time Tommy turned 8, I'd become more of a live-in maid than a daughter. Every morning started the same way: wake up early, make breakfast for everyone, pack Tommy's lunch and clean up after them all. The dishes were always waiting for me when I got home from school, along with a list of other chores Mom had thought up during the day. One evening, after spending hours cooking dinner, doing laundry, and helping Tommy with his homework, I finally broke down. My hands were raw from scrubbing pots, and my back ached from standing all day. "Mom, I'm exhausted," I said, my voice cracking. "Can't someone else help with the housework?" Dad looked up from his phone just long enough to say, "You're 13 now, Riley. You're old enough to help around the house. That's what responsible adults do." "But Tommy doesn't have to do anything," I protested. "Tommy's still young," Mom snapped. "He needs time to be a child." I wanted to scream that I was still a child too, but what was the point? Instead, I found myself spending more and more time at Aunt Sarah's house. Their home became my sanctuary, a place where I could just be a kid. Emma was 5 years younger than me, but she became like the little sister I wish Tommy had been. We'd spend hours creating elaborate structures, something I never got to do at home because Tommy would always destroy anything I built. Sometimes I'd stay overnight, sleeping in their spare room that gradually accumulated some of my things: a toothbrush, some pajamas, a few books. My parents never called to check where I was. I don't think they even noticed I was gone most of the time. Uncle Mark became the father figure I desperately needed. He'd often find me doing homework at their kitchen table late into the evening. "You know, Riley," he said one night, helping me with my algebra, "your parents might not see it, but you've got a bright future ahead of you. You need to focus on your studies though. Get good grades, win those scholarships, because I hate to say it, but I don't think your parents are planning to help with college." His words hit hard, but they also gave me purpose. I threw myself into my studies with renewed determination. I joined the school's debate club, staying late after school 3 days a week to practice. I entered every academic competition I could find: science fairs, essay contests, math Olympics. I won first place in the regional debate championship, beating students from 15 other schools. The local newspaper even did a small write-up about it. When I showed the article to my parents at dinner, Mom glanced at it briefly and said, "That's nice, dear. Oh, Tommy, tell Riley about how you scored a goal in soccer practice today." But their indifference only made me work harder. I started taking advanced placement classes, staying up late to complete extra credit assignments. My teachers noticed, even if my parents didn't. They started suggesting summer academic programs and college prep courses. When I turned 16, I got my first real job at the Sunshine Cafe, working as a waitress after school. For the first time in my life, I had my own money, earned by my own efforts. The first paycheck felt like freedom in my hands. I remember staring at the numbers on the paper, already planning what I could buy, maybe some new clothes that actually fit, or school supplies I wouldn't have to beg for. But my brief moment of independence didn't last long. Mom cornered me in the kitchen one evening, Dad standing behind her with his arms crossed. "So," she said, her voice sharp, "when were you planning to tell us about your job? You're making money while living under our roof, eating our food, using our utilities." Dad nodded. "We've decided that it's only fair you contribute to the household expenses. Half of your paycheck should cover it." Still, even with half my earnings gone, I managed to save enough to buy myself a smartphone. Nothing super fancy, but it was new and it was mine. The first real piece of technology I'd ever owned. I'd been using an ancient flip phone that could barely send texts, while Tommy had the latest iPhone. I was so proud of that phone. I downloaded educational apps, used it to take notes in class, even joined some study groups online. For a week, everything was perfect. Then Tommy spotted me using it. "Hey, that's a nice phone," he said, walking into my room without knocking. "Way better than that piece of junk you had before. Give it to me." I clutched the phone tighter. "No way. I bought this with my own money." His face twisted into that familiar spoiled expression. "Come on, my phone is getting old. I need a new one." When I refused again, he stormed out. I could hear him thundering down the stairs and I knew exactly where he was going. Sure enough, 10 minutes later, Mom and Dad appeared in my doorway. "Riley," Dad said in his reasonable voice that was anything but reasonable, "your brother tells us you're being selfish." "I bought this phone myself," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "With the money I earned after giving you half of my paycheck." They left eventually, but not before calling me ungrateful, selfish, and a terrible sister. I went to bed that night with my phone clutched tight to my chest. 3 days later, I found it in pieces on my bedroom floor. The screen was shattered, the case cracked open like someone had deliberately stomped on it. When I confronted Tommy, he just smirked. "Maybe you should take better care of your things," he said with a shrug. "Stuff breaks sometimes." The day my college acceptance letters arrived should have been one of the happiest days of my life. All those late nights studying, the extra classes, the academic competitions, they had finally paid off. 3 colleges had accepted me: Riverside University, Wellington College, and our local state university. I sat on my bed spreading the letters out in front of me. Riverside and Wellington were my dream schools, but they both required substantial tuition payments. State University wasn't as prestigious, but they'd offered me a full scholarship. The choice was obvious. I couldn't afford to pay for college on my own, and I knew better than to expect help from my parents. There was just one catch. The acceptance letter from State University included a note about housing. "As you reside within city limits, you do not qualify for student housing. Our dormitories are reserved for out-of-state and long-distance students only." I decided to share the news with my parents over dinner that night. Tommy was there too, shoveling pasta into his mouth while playing some game on his phone, the latest model of course. "I got accepted to college," I announced, trying to keep the pride in my voice. 3 of them actually. "I'm going to attend State University. They're offering me a full scholarship." To my surprise, both my parents looked up. Mom even smiled. "Well, that's wonderful, Riley," Dad said, actually sounding pleased for once. "You see what hard work can accomplish?" I felt a warm glow in my chest. Maybe things were finally changing. Maybe they were finally seeing me. Then Mom cleared her throat. "Now that you're going to be an adult student, we need to discuss your living arrangements. We've decided you should pay rent." When they named the amount, I literally choked on my pasta. Tommy had to pound me on the back, looking far too amused by my distress. That's almost $1,000. I gasped when I could breathe again. "That's impossible. I can't afford that." Mom shrugged, taking a delicate bite of her dinner. "We pay rent for this house every month, Riley. Have been for years. You're an adult now. It's time you learned about real-world responsibilities." "But I'll be a full-time student," I protested. Even if I worked 2 part-time jobs, I couldn't make that much. My parents exchanged a look I'd seen many times before, the one that meant trouble for me. Well, Dad said slowly, if you can't contribute to the household expenses, perhaps it's time you found your own place to live. Time to stand on your own 2 feet. But what about Tommy? I couldn't help asking. Will he have to pay rent when he turns 18? That's different, Dad snapped. Your brother has special needs. Special needs? Tommy was perfectly healthy now, hadn't had any health issues since he was a toddler, but I knew arguing was pointless. I spent the next 2 days packing my life into boxes and bags. It wasn't much. Years of being the less favored child meant I didn't have many possessions. Each item I packed felt like a reminder of all the things I'd never had, all the love I'd never received. As I carried my last box out the front door, I heard Tommy's voice behind me. Finally, he crowed. I'm going to turn your room into the ultimate gaming setup. Maybe I'll put the big TV where your bed was and the gaming chairs can go by the window. With nowhere else to go, I found myself standing on Aunt Sarah's doorstep that night, trying to hold back tears as I rang the doorbell. Uncle Mark opened the door, took one look at my face and the bags at my feet, and immediately called for Aunt Sarah. They did what? Aunt Sarah's voice rose in fury as I explained what had happened. They kicked you out, their own daughter? Because I couldn't pay their rent, I said, my voice breaking. They said, since I'm 18 now. I don't care if you're 18 or 80, Uncle Mark interrupted, his face red with anger. You're staying with us. No arguments. That night, as I lay in their guest room, my room now, I finally let myself cry. Not just from sadness or fear but from relief. For the first time in my life I felt truly at home. I spent that summer working full-time at the Sunshine Cafe, saving every penny I could for college expenses. Aunt Sarah and Uncle Mark refused to let me pay rent or buy groceries, insisting I focus on preparing for school. When fall came, I started my classes at State University. It was hard work, balancing studies with my part-time job at the cafe, but I was determined to succeed. Aunt Sarah and Uncle Mark treated me exactly like they treated Emma, helping me with assignments, celebrating my achievements, even insisting I join them on their family vacation to the beach. It was strange being treated as an equal member of the family. Every time they included me in family photos, every time they introduced me as our Riley to their friends, every time they hung my achievements on the wall next to Emma's, it healed a little piece of my heart. My parents and Tommy, they became strangers. Whenever we passed each other on the street, they would look right through me as if I were invisible. It hurt at first, but gradually I realized it hurt less than when they had been in my life. But Tommy couldn't leave well enough alone. One afternoon during my shift at the cafe, he walked in with a group of his friends. I knew immediately from his smirk that this wasn't a coincidence. Well, he drawled loudly as I approached their table. Look who it is, guys, my sister the waitress. Still serving coffee after college? Really living the dream, his friend snickered. I kept my face neutral, pulled out my order pad. Welcome to Sunshine Cafe, what can I get for you? Oh, I don't know. Tommy made a show of studying the menu. What would you recommend? I mean, you're the expert on cheap food, right? More laughter from his friends. Tommy spent the next 20 minutes ordering and then sending back everything I brought, complaining that the coffee was too hot, then too cold, that his sandwich had too much mayo, then not enough. Maybe if you'd studied something useful instead of just running away from home, he said loudly as I cleared their table, you wouldn't be stuck in this dead-end job. I wanted to tell him that I wasn't stuck anywhere, that I was working here by choice while I pursued my real career goals. But I just kept clearing the table, remembering what Aunt Sarah always said, some people are so small inside that they can only feel big by making others feel small. After graduating college, I landed an entry-level position at Anderson & Mills Consulting. The salary wasn't amazing, but it was steady, and more importantly, it was a foot in the door. I threw myself into the work with the same determination that had gotten me through school. After my second paycheck, I found a small one-bedroom apartment across town. When I told Aunt Sarah and Uncle Mark I was moving out, they both got teary-eyed. Are you sure you don't want to stay longer? Aunt Sarah asked, helping me pack. You know you're always welcome here. I hugged her tight. I know, but it's time for me to stand on my own feet. Besides, I'll visit so often you'll get sick of me. And I kept that promise. Every Sunday dinner, every holiday, random weeknight visits, I made sure they knew they were still my family. Emma would come crash at my apartment for sister sleepovers when she needed a break from college life, and I'd help her with her assignments just like Uncle Mark had once helped me. Years passed and I worked my way up the corporate ladder. Late nights, weekend projects, additional certifications, I did whatever it took. My dedication paid off. By the time I was 28, I'd been promoted to Senior Operations Director, managing a team of 30 people and earning more money than I'd ever dreamed possible. I'm thinking of buying a house, I announced one Sunday over dinner at Aunt Sarah and Uncle Mark's, something with a nice yard, maybe even a pool. That's wonderful. Aunt Sarah beamed. Oh, that reminds me, I ran into your mother at the grocery store last week. I tried to tell her how well you're doing. I thought maybe after all these years. She shook her head. She cut me off before I could finish. Said she doesn't have a daughter and doesn't care what you're doing? The words hung in the air like poison. Uncle Mark reached over and squeezed my hand, but I wasn't sad. In fact, for the first time in years I felt absolutely clear about what I needed to do. The next day I called my friend Jennifer, who worked as a realtor. Hey Jen, I need a favor. Can you find out who owns the house at 1247 Maple Street? Jennifer called back with the owner's contact information. Mr. Peterson had owned the property for over 20 years, the entire time my family had been renting it. My hand shook slightly as I dialed his number. Mr. Peterson? My name is Riley Anderson. I'm interested in buying your property on Maple Street. I'm prepared to offer 20% above market value. Cash deal, quick closing. 2 weeks later, I sat in a lawyer's office signing the final paperwork. As I wrote my name on the last page, I couldn't help but smile. The house where I'd experienced so much pain was now mine. My parents and Tommy were still living there, completely unaware that their landlord had changed. I called Jennifer again the next day. "One more favor," I said. "Could you contact my parents as their real estate agent? Tell them the house has a new owner who wants to inspect the property and discuss their lease. Just don't mention my name." "Oh, I am going to enjoy this," Jennifer laughed. "When do you want to do it?" We set the date for the following Tuesday. I spent the morning reviewing the property documents, making sure everything was in perfect order. As I drove to my old house, my heart was pounding, but not from fear, from anticipation. The house looked exactly the same as when I'd left it 6 years ago. I rang the doorbell. Mom opened the door, and for a moment we just stared at each other. Her face went from confusion to shock to anger in the span of seconds. "Riley, what are you doing here?" she demanded. Dad appeared behind her, and I could hear Tommy's heavy footsteps coming down the stairs. "Get out," Dad snapped. "We're waiting for someone important. The new owner of the house is coming to inspect the property." I smiled, reached into my briefcase and pulled out the deed. "Oh, he's already here. I bought the house 2 weeks ago. Would you like to see the documentation?" The silence that followed was deafening. Tommy had reached the bottom of the stairs now, his mouth hanging open. That's impossible," Dad stammered. "Actually, it's quite possible when you're a senior operations director at one of the city's top consulting firms," I replied, stepping past them into the house, my house. Mr. Peterson was quite happy with my offer. The transformation in their faces was almost comical. Mom's scowl melted into a sickly sweet smile. "Riley, sweetheart," she cooed. "Why don't you come sit down? I'll make some tea, we can catch up." "Like a proper family," Dad added quickly. "Family?" I couldn't help but laugh. "The same family that threw me out on the street when I couldn't pay their astronomical rent? The same family that told everyone they didn't have a daughter?" "Now, Riley," Mom started. "We were just trying to teach you responsibility." "Oh, I learned responsibility." I cut her off. "I learned it very well. In fact, let's discuss your new rent terms." I named the new monthly amount double what they'd been paying. The color drained from their faces. "That's impossible," Tommy exploded. "We can't afford that. Where are we supposed to get that kind of money?" I shrugged, echoing their words from years ago. "Not my problem. You have until the ST of next month to either pay the new rate or move out." They followed me to the door, their tone switching rapidly between pleading and threatening. Mom tried to grab my arm, but I pulled away. "Riley, please," she begged. "We're your family." "No," I said firmly. "You stopped being my family the day you chose your comfort over your daughter's future. You have days to decide what you're going to do." A month later, I stood across the street, watching as my parents and Tommy loaded the last of their belongings into a moving truck. They'd tried calling me multiple times over the past weeks, alternating between begging for more time and threatening legal action. I hadn't answered a single call. Mom noticed me first. She nudged Dad, who looked up from the box he was carrying. The hatred in their eyes was palpable. Tommy slammed the truck's rear door with unnecessary force, glaring in my direction. None of them said a word to me. They just got into their vehicles and drove away, leaving behind the house they'd rented for over decades. I waited until they were gone before walking up to my property. My property. The word still felt strange in my mind. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house felt bigger now, emptier, but still heavy with memories. Over the next 3 months I transformed the house completely. The walls that had witnessed my tears came down, creating an open-concept living space. The kitchen where I'd spent countless hours cooking for an ungrateful family was gutted and modernized. Tommy's precious game room, my old bedroom, became a home office with large windows and built-in bookshelves. Every change felt like erasing another painful memory. The contractor stripped the old wallpaper, and with it went the marks where I'd once measured my height alone because no one else cared to do it. The creaky floorboard that had always betrayed my late-night study sessions disappeared under new hardwood. The stained carpet that had held years of spills I'd been forced to clean up was replaced with sleek tiles. "It looks amazing," Aunt Sarah said when I gave her, Uncle Mark and Emma the grand tour. "It doesn't even look like the same house anymore." "That was the point," I replied, leading them onto the new back deck, my favorite addition to the house. We sat there drinking lemonade, my real family, watching the sunset over the backyard where a swing set once stood. Now there was a garden starting to bloom, new life springing from old soil. I never saw my parents or Tommy again after that day they moved out. Sometimes I heard snippets about them through the neighborhood grapevine. They'd moved to a small apartment across town. Tommy had finally moved out on his own when the reality of apartment living didn't suit him, but their lives weren't my concern anymore. My life was here, in this renovated house that no longer held ghosts, with Sunday dinners at Aunt Sarah and Uncle Mark's, movie nights with Emma, and holiday celebrations filled with genuine love and laughter. I had finally found what I'd been looking for all along, not revenge, not success, but the simple truth that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about love, support, and choosing to be there for each other no matter what.